Existence, al-wujud. Now we're about to read the 13 attributes. We probably won't get off of existence today. And so we have 13 headings here. I'll show you Yani, this navigation plane here. You can see there are 13 titles here: existence, eternity, independence, etc. But it's not intended by the title to only refer to the attribute of Allah. The real intent of the title is broader. So, existence, we're going to talk about existence. And we're going to talk about the existence of Allah Ta'ala in particular. And like that for the other titles. Allah is mawjood, existent. That's an adjective. Mawjood, existent. That's an adjective. So mawjood comes from the root letters waw, jim, dal. Wujud. Wujud means presence or existence. So if you say wajada, wajada, past tense verb, that means he found. He found. So there should be a direct object. Wajada shay, he found something. So then the one who does that is called wajid, a finder. It's one of Allah's names, by the way. Al-Wajid. Finder. So then what's the one, we're talking linguistically here, that receives this? That's called mawjood. So mawjood means found. But here for Allah, it means existent. So mawjood means found or present in a linguistic sense. So it means existent for Allah Ta'ala. And ka'in, being or existing. Existing here, though, as an adjective, not as a verb. So ka'in, that comes from kaf, waw, noon. Kaun. Kaun means existence. Being. Being. That's what kaun means. Being, which means existing. So then someone who has this attribute of kaun, being, would be called ka'in, being with the meaning of existing or existent. And he is shay, something. And that means existing. Allah says, قُلْ أَيُّ شَيْءٍ أَكْبَرُ شَهَادَةً قُلِ اللَّهُ. O Muhammad, say, which shay, which thing, which something is best at witnessing? Akbaru shahadatan. So if I try to translate as literally as I could possibly here. Qul, say, you, meaning, O Muhammad, ayu shay, which thing, akbaru, is greater, shahadatan, at witnessing. Hakadha. That's the closest I can get it. Qulillah, say Allah. Yani, O Muhammad, say Allah is that shay. So that proves then that Allah could be called shay. But that doesn't prove that that's a name of his. It's not a name of his. That's a word that we're allowed to use. Abu Hanifa said, وَهُوَ شَيْءٌ لَا كَالْأَشْيَاءِ وَمَعْنَى الشَّيْء الثَّابِتُ بِلَا جِسْمٍ وَلَا جَوْهَرٍ ولا عرض ولا حد له ولا ضد له ولا ند له ولا مثل له. He is something unlike other things. The meaning of shay, thing or something, for God, that is. That's the context of his statement. He doesn't mean linguistically here. The meaning of shay in our discussion here is the confirmed bodiless one. Confirmed, a thabit bila jism, without a body. Who's confirmed without a body. The confirmed bodiless one. Without a particle or quality. Now, I want to use the word property. Property. For adad, property. Because things have properties. I like that word better. For example, a magnet has some properties, right? That's its qualities that it has, its attributes. Or glass has its properties, and like that. So I'm going to probably stick with this word here. For adad, fleeting quality, yani fleeting properties. He is something unlike other things. The meaning of shay is the confirmed bodiless one, without a particle property and without having a limit, opposite, similar, or likeness. There are two kinds of arguments for God's existence. Both fulfill the obligation. What obligation? The personal obligation of having evidence for the validity of your religion. That's an obligation on each accountable individual. No child can rely on his parents here and say, this is the religion of my fathers. This is my religion because this is the religion of my father. That's not sufficient, even though this is the right religion. And nobody else can rely on somebody else without having any evidence for the correctness of his religion. There are two kinds of arguments for God's existence. Both fulfill the obligation of inferring proof for the correctness of your religion. One is a simple natural inference that since things exist, something unlike them must have made them. That's simple. Yani, this argument here can occur to different people in different ways. But that's the crux of it, whichever way it might come to someone. Since things exist, something unlike them must have made them. Then this will fulfill one's obligation. And a detailed argument means has premises and conclusions. The first one has also premise and conclusion, but it's so simple. The second one is more detailed, so we want to unravel it more. Its presence is, as Imam An-Nasafi said, and this is Nasafi the theologian, قال أهل الحق حقائق الأشياء ثابتة. The people of the truth proclaim, the realities of things are confirmed. So that's a premise. The realities of things are confirmed. Yani, that's a premise. That means we're saying to arrive at the conclusion we want. The conclusion we want is that God exists. How we got to that conclusion? By premises. Those premises start here. The world exists. Yani, things exist. Yani, there's reality. Things are real. Because of the intellect and because of the senses and the religious texts, we believe that things are real. If someone says nothing's real, that's blasphemy. The human, the sky, the wood, stone, water, air, etc. are existing and not imaginary. So that's why I was saying to you, the title existence, it's broader than only to talk about God's existence. We want to talk about existence. Allah said, and you know this proof by now, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. The praise and thanks are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds. Yani, that's a proof in Aqidah, this ayah. In this verse, Allah confirmed his existence and that of his creations. And he distinguished himself from them. So this ayah confirms the attribute of existence for God, and it confirms the attribute of dissimilarity. And Nasafi also said, وَالْعَالَمُ بِجَمِيعِ أَجْزَائِهِ مُحْدَث إِذْ هُوَ أَعْيَانٌ وَأَعْرَاضٌ. The world with all of its components is an occurrence or an event because it is composed of things with volume and properties properties, which is qualities. Objects, bodies, and pieces and particles are all created events. These are words here for things that fill a space. Object, so that's going to be prayer rug, that's an object. A house is an object. Bodies, you know what that means. Pieces, particles are all created events. These are things with volume. Volume means fills a space, like you know already. Fills a space. What space? Fills its own space. That space. What space does the volume fill? It fills its own space. That's important to understand. You might say, yeah, it's obvious. It's clear. Sure, it fills its own space. So what's so profound about that? Because then someone's going to say to you, what place is the whole universe in? So what's the answer? Same answer. It fills its own space. It fills its own space. It's not in a place. It fills its own space. Meaning, its place is not in a place. That's what that means. Because a place wouldn't be in a place. Because that leads to what? That leads to tasalsul, the beginningless chain. To say that a place is in a place would mean then that place could be in a place, and then you could keep going forever. Beginningless chain, all scenarios of beginningless chain are invalid. That's a fundamental mental rule, a mental rule put in the forefront for yourself. Anytime any idea, Yani, is presented to you, and then you think about it, and then you find that upon investigation, this idea leads to a beginningless chain, then know that that idea is invalid. So if someone says, well, what place is the world in? It fills its own place. It fills its own space, Yani. And then you don't say a place is in a place, because that leads to an impossibility. Then, because his mind falls short, then he's going to say to you, this is a Wahhabi. So then the world is like Allah. You said Allah exists without a place. I just asked you, where's the whole universe? And now you told me universe not in a place. So Allah is not in a place, universe not in a place. You compare Allah to the universe? That's how crippled his mind is. So he's saying, therefore, Allah must be in a place. That's where he wants to get at. The answer is that the difference that Allah doesn't fill a space. He doesn't even fill a space. He exists without a place, without filling a space. The universe fills its own space. It's like I fill my own space, and you fill your own space. And then it's not valid to say that a place is in a place after that. Hopefully that's clear, inshallah ta'ala. So objects and bodies and pieces and particles, those are all volumes. That means they fill a space. They fill their own space. They are all created events. How we know they are created events? Because alternating qualities or properties, I'll keep the word quality here so to switch up the words. Because alternating qualities, meaning properties like motion and stillness, are bound to them. Alternating is an important word here. Because alternating means coming and going. Starting and stopping. And starting and stopping means what? Created. So that's another way of saying, because created qualities and created properties are bound to these volumes, like motion and stillness. So if they are bound, if they're stuck together, Yani, the object, it has its own standing. Okay. The property of the object, it doesn't have its own standing. Okay. Yani, it exists through this object. The object is the vessel for this property. But the property itself comes and goes. the movement and the stillness, and the movement and the stillness. So this coming and going is stuck to this object. There's something about this object that comes and goes. So that's another way of saying there's something about this object that's created. Then that means the object is created, because this createdness is bound to this object. This object cannot escape this createdness we're describing. A thing with volume cannot be devoid of qualities, like contact and separation. Here we mention motion and stillness, and here we mention contact and separation. They have the same judgment, and those four together are called al-akwan. Al-akwan. Akwan. I'm going to call those for now the four states of being. The four states of being. So in the Aqidah lesson, if you were asked, what are the Akwan? Then you say motion, stillness, contact, and separation. That's what they are. If someone were to ask me, how do I translate that? Then I'd offer the four states of being. So if the qualities are occurrences, which is proven by the fact that they alternate, they come and go, then the things to which they are bound are also occurrences because they cannot be separated. The rule is, whatever cannot exist before an event is an event. Whatever cannot exist before an event is an event. So then, if something did exist before events, that would mean it's not an event. So then God himself, he's not an event. He's not something that happened. He existed eternally. Whatever cannot exist before an event, like motion and stillness, it is an event. Yani everything, every object or every volume that Allah brings into existence, the instant it comes into existence, it's either going to be moving or still. Yani either it's going to come into existence in motion or it's going to come into existence in stillness. And then motion and stillness can alternate. Whichever one it started as, it can alternate between them. Same thing for contact and separation. The instance in which it came into existence is either going to be in contact with something or disconnected from something. And then those two will alternate, or at least they could. It would be valid that they would. Even if a thing never stops moving, it's still valid that it could. So if the entities and qualities are both occurrences, then the world composed of them is also an occurrence. And Nasafi said, وَالْمُحْدِثُ لِلْعَالَمِ هُوَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى. And the one who made the world occur is Allah the Exalted. Johnny, that's the conclusion. So we just gave the detailed argument for God's existence. This detailed argument, till we got right here to the conclusion. That's the end of the argument. It's the conclusion. That's enough to fulfill your obligation. The personal obligation of verifying you have correct religion. The philosophers have disagreed with this and split into two groups. The ancient ones, like Aristotle, said that the upper world is eternal by its kind and elements, and that the world's matter and qualities are beginningless. And what they mean is it just takes different forms, which that's a contradiction in itself. They believe that something beginningless could change. So the very house I'm in, they believe that the material that makes up this house, whatever, plaster or wood or whatever, they believe that it was eternally existing in another form, some way or another. Ibn Sina and Al-Farabi followed them. Those two, some would call them Islamic philosophers. Sheikh says they're not Muslims though, And someone would call them Islamic philosophers because they're not affiliated with another religion, but not because they're Muslims. And he says that they shouldn't be called Islamic philosophers when that gives the impression that they're Muslims. But he did teach us the difference between Muslim and Islamic. Those are different. The Arabic word for Islamic is Islami, Islami, with a ya on the end. So someone might be Islamic, doesn't mean he's a Muslim though. So Islamic means what? Means affiliated with Islam. From there, you might say Islamic group, and you mean a deviant group. They might even be kafir. Doesn't mean Muslim. But you still want to observe your audience so that you don't confuse them. They might not know what you mean by your words. The latter day philosophers, and they are the majority between the two groups, said that only the types of what is in the world are eternal. The individual units are eventual. They have been followed by Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah, who thought it too low of himself to be affiliated with them. So out of lies and slander, he attributed this case to the Salaf and the scholars of Hadith, without naming anyone in particular, though. That's how fraud will get over on some common Muslims. He says to them, the scholars said. So when you hear that statement from a reliable teacher, then you accept it. What if somebody's not reliable and you don't know? And he tells you, the scholars said. Then you're going to take a lie. That's what Ibn Taymiyyah did here. He said, this is the position of the Salaf and the scholars of Hadith. So this second position, you know it, Yani, we talked about it so many times, which is what? The belief in eternal kinds. What the first group is saying is that the upper world itself, it is uncreated as it is, in the form that appears to us. And this is what they said, Yani, this old group. Maybe you wouldn't find someone who believes like that now. Allahu A'lam. But those old ones were saying, that upper world that we see above us, it was always like how we see it. And this lower world upon which we live, its material is eternal, and it was always in some form or another. So that has in it the meaning of beginningless kind. The latter day ones, and they overtook the whole party, they said that what's eternal is the kinds of things. Each unit, each individual human is the created thing, but the kind is eternal. They both have an amount of believing in beginningless kinds, though, both groups. And this is what they teach, or at least used to teach, even in grade school. Nowadays, I don't know if they even teach it in grade school. Education is so poor. Western education is so poor now, even on a collegiate level, that maybe they don't even teach them these things anymore. That they were telling them that energy can't be created or destroyed and things like that. I'm not talking about a philosophy class. I'm talking about regular science class. As Subki said about Ibn Taymiyyah, يرى حوادث لا مبدأ لأولها في الله سبحانه عما يظن به. يرى حوادث لا مبدأ لأولها في الله سبحانه عما يظن به. He sees events as without beginning, occurring in Allah. He, Allah, is glorified beyond what he thinks of him. So if I just translate it with its pronouns. He sees events as without beginning in Allah. He is glorified beyond what he thinks of him. So he being Ibn Taymiyyah, and then he meaning Allah, as you can see there. Badruddin az-Zarkashi said in Tashnif al-Masami' about both factions of philosophers. The Muslims considered them misguided and charged them with blasphemy. Wa subhanallahi wa bihamdih. Time. Concerning time, existence is judged in three ways. One is existence that starts and stops. That includes everything in this world, as well as the seven skies and the earth. Ibn Taymiyyah and his likes said that the speech of God and his will start and stop. That's what Subki was talking about. So that is obvious shirk. Al-Halimi and Wahhabis, they still believe like that until now. And when they talk about the speech of Allah, this is how they're going to talk. Because that's what they believe. They believe that Allah speaks and then stops speaking. And then he will speak and then he will stop speaking. And then he will will something and then stop willing. And then will something else and then stop willing. That's blasphemy. Al-Halimi said that confessing that the world will come to an end is confessing that it has a beginning, because something eternal could not have an end. Two, existence that starts and goes on without end. That includes paradise, hellfire, and the soul. When we say paradise and hell, that means and what they contain too. Even al-hurul ain, those women of paradise, and al-ghilman al-mukhalladun, the perpetual youths of paradise, both of those are non-human creatures. When I was translating once, came to me, alien, but I'm not going to use that word. But I think really it works, the word itself, but maybe it's not good manners. They're not angels or humans or genies. What are they? They are people of paradise. They're everlasting too because they're in paradise. They're not going to die. And three, existence eternal and everlasting. That means existence without time. Existence without regarding time. That is for Allah and His attributes only. And that's clear. Wa subhanallahi wa bihamdih. Toy, existence eternal and everlasting. So that means that what did we do here talking in the chapter of existence? The issue of eternality came up right now. That has its own chapter. And the issue of everlastingness came up right now. That has its own chapter. And the case with these attributes is that you can't mention one of them without mentioning another. Wa subhanallahi wa bihamdih. Place. We're talking about existence. So when we talk about existence, you have eternal existence, you have created existence. So if you have created existence, then you need to consider time and place also. So we just talked about time. And we said, as for what's unapplicable to time, exists without time being applicable, that's for God and His attributes only. Now, what about place? Concerning place, existence is also judged in three ways. So time, concerning time, we're going to judge existence in three ways. Concerning place, we're going to judge existence in three ways. So that summary right there helps you a lot. That compacts it for you. Time, what are we saying? Either existing with a beginning and an end, that's one. Or existing with a beginning without an end, that's two. Or existing without beginning or end, that's three. Now, what about place? And place here is more detailed. So that's why we mentioned time first. To mention its cases, which are brief and easy, and get it out the way. Now, what about place? That has more details. And You can see then, this being more detailed, you can see why this is harder for some people to comprehend. Yani, for a person to comprehend that Allah exists without a beginning is easy. But for some people, it's not easy for them to comprehend that He exists without a place. Those should be equally easy, though. Existence without a time and existence without a place. Those should be as easy as the other. If Allah made it easy for you, then that's His mercy. And for some, it's not easy. They said, without time, okay, I can see, but without place, how? Concerning place, existence is also judged in three ways. One is what occupies a space independently. That includes particles and bodies, as you know. And Nasafi said, فَالْأَعْيَانُ مَا لَهُ قِيَامٌ بِذَاتِهِ. The thing with volume is what has a standing on its own. Yani, it's self-contained. وهو إما مركب وهو الجسم أو غير مركب كالجوهر وهو الجزء الذي لا يتجزأ. It would either be composed, and that is the body, or not composed, such as the single, yani, such as the particle, the johar. So what does it mean, say it's not composed? That means to say it fills its own space and it can't be broken to pieces. Self-contained, fills its own space. Such as the particle, the johar, which is the piece that does not split. Al-juz'u alladhi la yatajazza. That's the piece that doesn't split. So the true atom is the smallest particle. So I'm usually saying particle. And the word atom, A-T-O-M, really is fine in its classical sense. One of the things that you need to be aware of is that this time we live in has new terminology in different things, in sciences, yani. And they think that they have done something that others didn't do before in discovering the truth, which is not always the case. So, for example, this word atom, the classical meaning of atom is what we're talking about right now, this unsplittable piece. And that's not particular to Muslims. But now they say atom and they mean something else, something splittable. And then that became like overwhelming usage for this word, not the classical meaning. So that's why, yani, I'm tending to avoid the word atom, although really it works. What's similar to that? What's similar to that is the word planet. Nowadays they say, planet is one thing, and a moon is something else, and a star is something else. And really, the sun is a star. They say the sun, that's just a star amongst the stars. It's the closest star to us. And a moon, that's something we're going to call it a satellite. And a planet, that's something else too, that whatever they define it as. That's not classical, though. Classical, all of that is planets. All these heavenly things. Those stars and moon, sun, that's all planets, kawakib. And like that, and that's why I'm digressing slightly here. That's why I wouldn't be surprised if the word semen really works for women originally. But because of so-called progression in science and updating things, then they started separating or changing the words. So anyway, the true atom is the smallest particle, which is the smallest physical matter. Yani the most miniature. It's the most miniature any volume could be. Being the smallest means that it cannot be divided. Because that means that if it could be divided, it means it could get smaller. Yani, what we're saying is being unsplittable equates to being most miniature. Those mean the same thing here. It is the basis for the jism, the body, and hence it is called al-jawhar al-fard, the single atom or the single particle, according to the terminology of the scholars of Tawheed. The mental argument, besides what will be mentioned shortly, the mental argument for particles, not God's existence. The mental argument declares the impossibility of an endless link of pieces. The impossibility of an endless link of pieces. And endless here means basically beginningless. Endless here means beginningless. Meaning, if you have an object, it has obvious end because you can see its edges. So if I have my phone in my hand, then my vision can encompass its edges. So it has end from this perspective. But what about if I keep splitting it and splitting it and splitting it and splitting it? Is it possible that I could keep splitting it forever? That's not possible. That would mean that there's an endless link of pieces. This is impossible, meaning beginningless link of pieces. I.e., this is a case of tasalsul. So what do we say? Any iteration of tasalsul, anything that leads to a beginningless chain is invalid. Had it been valid that a physical piece could continually be reduced forever, then a beginningless chain would be valid. Those two are the same. However, a beginningless chain is impossible. So also a piece that can be reduced forever is impossible. I think that's clear. See, these things are very important for the mind because just throw some wrong thing to a person, let's say a school child or even an adult, though, like saying that matter cannot be created or destroyed, or energy cannot be created or destroyed, or types of things are eternal, not the units themselves. So when a person takes things like that and then he internalizes them, he makes them a part of himself, then he's making that part of his mind. He's making that part of his thought process. So he's going to have corruption in his mind. But if his mind is good, then when those things come to him and then he processes them, then he will say, wait, pause, hold on. That doesn't pass some of my inspection here. This idea is not passing some of my mental inspection. Wouldn't this mean such and such? Wouldn't this lead to a beginningless chain? For example, Allah said, وَكُلُّ شَيْءٍ عِنْدَهُ بِمِقْدَارٍ. Everything of His has a measure. Thus, if everything has a measure, it is impossible that particles could be endlessly divided, because that would mean it doesn't have a measure. Because what has no base or start cannot be measured. So this ayah, وَكُلُّ شَيْءٍ عِنْدَهُ بِمِقْدَارٍ, that's an evidence in the Quran for unsplittable pieces. Also this ayah, وَأَحْصَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ عَدَدًا, He encompasses the numbers of all things by His knowledge. Here Allah establishes for us that all things have a specific count, and thus He knows the count of the particles, and He knows the count of the breaths of the people of paradise, meaning He knows every one of them from their first, even though they're endless. So an endless chain is not impossible. A beginningless chain is what's impossible. A chain that has a beginning and goes on forever is not impossible. It's a chain that comes to an end and has no beginning that's impossible. How could it come to an end and it has no beginning? That's impossible. If someone says that a piece, an object, has Unsplittable pieces. That means this phone that's in my hand and I can see its edges. So its edges means that's where it ends. So how can something, now we're talking about space, not time, but they're similar in this way. Yani space and time, what do they have in common? Beginning and end. This, now we're talking about space. So this object here, my vision encompasses its edges, so it has ends. So how could it have no beginning? How is it that it has an end but doesn't have a beginning? So there must be then for it a fundamental piece that can't be split. The philosophers, except Democritus and the Mu'tazila who followed An-Nazam, denied the existence of the Johar. He said, An-Nazam that is, that the parts of a piece are infinite, that it is always possible to divide a mustard seed, for example, and that it would never come to a piece that is not made of other pieces. This argument necessitates the eternality of the world. To say that everything in this world is made of basically beginningless pieces, but we're talking about space here, it amounts to saying that the world has no beginning. This necessitates the eternity of the world, and it is something that the mind does not accept in the first place. Had it been possible to divide the mustard seed into infinite pieces, and likewise a great mountain, there would be no difference between the seed and the mountain. Now, those people who argued for infinite particles for any object, their argument for denying a smallest indivisible particle was, even if a piece were extremely small, it must be infinitely divisible, because everything that dwells in a space, everything that's filling its own space, it has a right side and a left side. That's two. And each side is different from the other. So you can't have two without two ones. Thus, by necessity, it can always be divided. Now, right there, somebody could get swept away. Or so many levels, a person gets swept away. Only by the guidance of Allah, person will stay guided throughout all the cases. May Allah guide us, keep us guided, and me. Because it might convince him, that argument. He'll say, yeah, whoa, oh man, that's crazy. Our argument is that it is valid that one piece of matter can have two surfaces that are both qualities, properties, and not divisible substances, as proven by the example of the edge of a line. It is not divisible, or else it would not be an edge. So ponder on that. The edge of a line, or the edge of anything. The edge is not divisible, or else it wouldn't be the edge. So, and we said before, the fact that things have edges proves that there are indivisible pieces. That is in itself evidence for the existence of indivisible pieces, edges of things. So what we're saying then is that it's possible that something could be so miniature that its edges, it would have edges if it's filling a space, but none of those edges can be split. That's how small it is. It's the ultimate miniaturization. That's something that can't even be imagined. What we're talking about is something that we are rationally concluding, not something that we could observe because it's too small. Our answer is that it is valid that one piece of matter can have two surfaces that are both qualities and not divisible substances. As proven by the example of the edge of a line, it is not divisible, or else it would not be an edge. This particle cannot be split because of its exaggerated miniaturization. It cannot be broken because of its great solidarity. It cannot be imagined and then divided in the imagination even, because one is unable to distinguish its edges, meaning anything that you did imagine It wouldn't really be such a particle because such a particle is so small that you can't sense it. So how could you imagine it if you could never even detect it by your senses? What are you imagining? So it's unimaginable, this piece. It's too small. So you can't imagine it and then split it in your imagination. What those people are doing is they're imagining something that isn't itself, if it were real, it would be made of pieces, but they imagine it as one piece and then they split it. It also cannot be supposedly divided. Yani, for argument's sake. If for argument's sake, let's divide it for argument's sake. Because such a supposition opposes the reality that has been ordained by Allah. That means there's no argument's sake here. It's not real. There's no such thing as a piece that can be split forever. If it were said, what is the benefit? Yani, what is the point? Let's put point here. What is the point of mentioning the smallest indivisible particle? And what is the point behind this case? Whose question is that? That's a Wahhabi's question. Because all this talk is not embraced by Wahhabis. All this talk right now is bid'ah to a Wahhabi and philosophy because he doesn't have monotheism. He thinks that observing the world and using our minds and then making arguments based on observation of the world is haram altogether. Although Allah says, وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, this ayah. And they think about the creation of heavens and earth. For what? What did they do with that? So for the Wahhabis, they don't really understand what this means. They think about the creation of heavens and earth. It means they don't even, only very little bit, they think about creation of heavens and earth. So if it were said, what is the point of mentioning the smallest indivisible particle? And what is the point behind this case? Now, the ayah I just recited for you validates talking about this. But more direct answer is, this is among the fundamental premises for arguing that the world is created. If it is established that a body is composed of indivisible particles, it would be impossible for that body to be devoid of the four states of being: the akwan, motion, stillness, connection, and separation. Those particular properties alternate with their counterparts. When one vanishes, the other appears. Whatever is not devoid of events does not precede them. That's what we already said. Anything that can't escape an event then means can't exist before an event. And whatever does not precede events is itself an event. Or else a beginningless chain would be possible. But that's impossible. وَسُبْحَانَ اللَّهِ وَبِحَمْدِهِ